The first slide I have here is not what we're going to talk about. This is the India that everybody talks about. This is the India that you hear when you see promos for events like this or presentations like this or promos for India. These are some of the images you will see. Probably even more fancier stuff. It might seem kind of bizarre to show this in the middle of a COVID crisis, but as of yesterday, the IMF or the World Bank, I forgot who, declared that India next year is still going to rise at 8%. We are going to go back to the growth rate that we had. And there is India is a rocket ship. But the interesting thing is this is just is just about 100 million people doing all of this. 1 billion people still remain in poverty. What is interesting and dark and horrific is that the number of people we are going to lose to COVID, through this crisis, I don't know how many it will be. It will be in the range of 100 to 200,000, I hope, and probably less. Will be dwarfed by the number of people we lose just to hunger or diarrhea or any one of those. I mean, any one of those, not just all of them together. That is the continuing crisis that India lives through. And no matter what we seem to do, that part of India does not seem to budge. And I spent a few years trying to understand that, and I will share whatever I have, learned in that process, and what we can do and what you can do about that. And really, we are trying to create a world that serves the poor. And if you look at poverty very closely, as a computer scientist, poverty will start appearing like an information problem. Almost every root cause of poverty has a missing information system behind it, either trust or transparency and so on. And the interesting thing is that apart probably from YouTube and WhatsApp, 1 billion people really don't benefit from all the technology that we take for granted and we benefit from. And technology that matters to them has really not been built. And that's what we are here to talk about today. Can it be built? And the good news is that because of the work that some of the audience has done, and because of the last 4 decades of technology work, Silicon is starting to think. Both the hardware is becoming capable and the software is becoming capable. And some of us believe that by 2030 we will hit this inflection point. And being as old as I am, having done my PhD in 1997 and being a colleague of Hans Moravec, I have seen many versions of this graph over the last 2.5 decades, and it actually has not changed that much, maybe shifted by 4 or 5 years. And it's still debatable whether we will reach human intelligence, but we will reach close to human computing power and sensing power and memory power. And when we do, most of what we call as work will be automated or can be automated. And I'm not going to bore you with all of these. The audience really understands it, but I'll just put the visuals in front of you so that you sort of get the context that almost every part of human endeavor is right in the middle of being automated. You don't see it because most of them are startups. Most of them are quietly behind the scenes. When you click on buy in Amazon or Flipkart, machines go to work and fulfill your order and things like that. And no field of human endeavor is left being untouched. Everything from something as sophisticated as anesthesiology to writing articles in the New York Times to computer art and music. Music you probably heard, but you probably don't even know was done by a machine. And according to the World Bank and the Brookings Institute, about 69% of India's jobs are disappearing. This is in a country where we are adding 25 million people to the workforce every year, and jobs are disappearing. So why is this a solution and not a problem, right? And solution or a problem, as a engineer, I have to talk about facts the way they are. And the facts are that we are at the right at the beginning, first inning of the infinity era. I call it the infinity era very simply because almost any innovation you create, assuming the demand is there, can be scaled infinitely, almost at zero cost. Initially, it just used to be software, and soon hardware will start being scaled almost infinitely, literally at the cost of material and energy to produce it. And before we think that this is just a Bay Area, Silicon Valley thing and only applicable to the US and maybe Europe where population is declining, it's not entirely true. So I have a little math at the bottom of the screen, which is what is the EMI for a 9 lakh robot. So a 9 lakh robots, assuming the utility of that robot is for 7 years, if the total cost is 9 lakhs, the EMI is about 15,000 per month, which is less than what you would pay for any skilled worker, and most semi-skilled workers like drivers and maids in urban area. So and it is quietly happening. It is very quietly happening. We don't see it because most people don't want to talk about it. People get harassed if they say that they're automating, but people are. Our most efficient companies are doing it very quietly. Our most efficient business are underway, and they have to, because if they don't, they lose competition, and they lose their competitive edge. And economy, the very nature of economy itself is shifting from the idea of capital and resources and labor to capital and resources and inventions. And very soon, capital will actually become so cheap that it will just be natural resources and invention. And this paradigm shift is so vast and deep that people are, like all of us, like seven blind men to an elephant, are trying to figure out what this means. But let me just talk about focused on the billion people. This talk is entirely focused on the billion people who are, still unserved. And I want to address all of this, including the information revolution, including the AI revolution and the infinity era, and why it is material for this population, right? So let's talk about what is so far not material for this population, but will be soon. These are some of the 10 most innovative companies in the US, and I use US as an example, forgive me, because I spent a lot of time there and understand the companies there very well. And some of these are not Silicon Valley companies. Some of these are not even West Coast technology companies. Some of these are so-called old school companies like Bechtel and GE and Boeing and so on. But all of them have one thing in common. They are all infinity era companies, right? And I call them singularities. And the definition of a singularity is a company that has more than $50 billion of revenue and still growing like crazy, still growing faster than a nation grows. Sometimes as fast as 25%, some would say, at a cancerous rate. And the interesting thing about these companies is if you put the revenue, this is not the market caps, this is the revenue. If you add up their revenues, it is about half of India's GDP. And if you add up the revenues of their vendors, it is more than India's GDP. And all of this is being powered by a workforce, including their contractors, of about 3 million people, right? Less than, I'm sitting in the city of Bangalore right now, but less than 1/4 of the population of Bangalore, right? So, so you have this concentration of ideas among these 3 million super competent people who are now dissipating technology, which is literally touching every nook and corner of the world, right? But the contrast is none of this is yet touching the billion people who are still outside the gates of development. And let me give you one more example. I promised one example about India. The backdrop of this image is a cotton mill, right? It's a modern cotton mill. This happens to be image from one of the cotton mills developed by one of my juniors from one of the universities I went to. He doesn't want to be public with this, but he builds a new yarn factory every 5 years. Every 5 years, the productivity of that yarn factory doubles in terms of total output, and the amount of labor in that factory reduces, which means a total scaling of 4x. And the cost of building that factory remains the same. And not a surprise, he is deeply using automation and robotics and AI and all of those. And interestingly, because he's doing that, his quality is increasing, his error rates are going down, and he's able to compete with the best of the best across the world, right? Now, coming back to Earth, right, and India particularly, why does all of this matter? Why should we not, like some people have said, keep automation out of the country, keep AI out of the country, let people have jobs. So what if you're a little bit more inefficient, or even a lot more inefficient? People need to have jobs. I'll give you two reasons. The obvious reason, which you must have heard about, is that if we do that, we will become so uncompetitive. And because we are an import-driven economy, we will literally tank, which is true. It's a tautology, right? But there is a bigger reason. There is a bigger reason why, I went to school in 1997 to learn robotics, and why my mentor Raj Reddy developed this field. And there are many of us idealists. Jawahar is one of them, trying to figure out this whole AI revolution. And the reason is that is illustrated by this example in front of you. So what I did is said, okay, we are going to declare that Indian kids will receive the same quality of education as the Western counterparts. Otherwise, they will fall behind. And I don't mean our kids, I mean every child in India. And I'm declaring that our administration and services will be as good as what you would find if you went to Santa Clara or Pittsburgh or one of these places. And similarly, the banking and financial system that each and every person has is also of that caliber and quality. And everybody is included financially, everybody gets the loans they deserve, and everybody gets serviced fully, right? And similarly, law and order, and so on and so forth, and healthcare. And I'll spend a little bit time on healthcare because that is the biggest ticket item. Now, the numbers you see at the bottom of each of them, $1 trillion, 0.3 trillion, 3.3 trillion, 2 trillion, and 4 trillion, is the amount of money it will take to serve every Indian, fully with that quality. If we spent approximately the same amount that the West spends on the same problem. Now you can say, yes, we can do it cheaper, but you can do it cheaper probably by a factor of 2, maybe 3, not more, right? So where did these numbers come from? Let me just illustrate. The best healthcare system in the West, which is low cost, is run by UK. It's about $3,000 per capita. The most expensive system is $12,000 per capita in the US, so let's ignore that. But even if you spend $3,000 per capita, we will end up spending $4 trillion. Even if we do 1/4 of that, that's $1 trillion. Now, India's budget is approximately $250 billion. Now, you can extrapolate, even at 8 or 10% growth rate, how many years will it take for us to get to that growth rate, right? And the answer is never, probably not for the next 30 years. And the answer lies in reducing the cost of healthcare from $3,000 to $200 per capita. And similarly, the rest of them. So a factor of, a factor of 10 reduction in cost, and a factor of 20 sometimes. And this is possible using technology and Indian innovation. And I'll give you a quick example from my own life, like Lakshmi said. This is old, so forgive me if some of you have seen this example of what we did to solve a global problem, which was very expensive. When I first came to India, this was the world that was mapped. And it used to cost $15 per kilometer to map a kilometer of a road. So maps were only affordable by the Western Europe, US, and maybe Japan, right? And then we said, well, this state of being has to change. And we had a very simple idea that we will, crowdsource it, allow people to map, use technology of computational geometry, a little bit of machine learning, and so on and so forth, and also disseminate it from the crowd and make it real time. And I'll skip the video of how this happened. And actually, let's play the video for 15 seconds so you see how actually people did it in Madurai. Can you play the video, please? So you're seeing in front of you how people of Madurai, over a period of 3 months when we launched MapMaker, went ahead and mapped all of Madurai. This is on a log scale. And it was astonishing to see how fast and how accurately they mapped, right? And we had a world lit up by 2012. 3 billion people had been mapped, less than 4 years, and people credit AI, people credit the team at Google that did it, people credit me or others. The answer is that AI is 1%, the technology we built was 10%, the people were 90%. And that is the power of providing technology that is in the hands of people. And this example is this person who actually spent 4 years. He's an ex-IAS officer who spent 4 years mapping rural Kerala. And he's a hero of mine. He passed away. And he knew in those 4 years that he had cancer, but he wanted to leave Kerala fully mapped, Mr. CNR Nair. I want to leave a couple of thoughts with you that once this happened, all kinds of uh, I'm sorry, all kinds of examples started lighting up of the world started using these maps for many things, including disaster response in Africa, in Pakistan, in India, and so on. And fast forward, we have used this map for the COVID response. This is the Arogya Setu map of hotspots that we were able to determine using computation statistics. And the hotspots, which, when curbed, help the cities in figuring out how to contain this. The WHO released a note yesterday saying how effective this was. And really, I want to go back to the words of Martin Luther King, um, who said that, the God does not give you a vision without giving you the strength to fulfill that. And Gandhi ji used to say that poverty is the worst form of violence. And I want to leave you with a few ideas where, and one way of thinking about it is that it's really time that we bring an end to the world where poverty is subsidizing the world, right? Today we live in a world where poverty is subsidizing us, and we want to probably have a world where the world works for the poor and makes everybody equal citizens.